Today, we're going to tackle one of the most complex, most entrenched struggles in modern history. We're going to use our source material to break down over 100 years of conflict, how it all got started, why it keeps escalating, and what the future could even look like. All right, let's dive in. It's the question so many of us ask, right? You have this one piece of land, claimed by two people, in a struggle that has defined the region for generations and, honestly, continues to shape global politics. Together, we're going to unpack the key reasons why a resolution has been so incredibly hard to find. And you might be wondering, why should this matter so much to the rest of the world? Well, because this is anything but a distant, isolated conflict. As you can see here, it directly involves huge global powers like the United States and Iran. It shakes the stability of the entire Middle East, which, has a ripple effect on global markets, and it touches on deeply held religious beliefs for billions of people. The stakes are absolutely global. Okay, so to make sense of all this, here's our game plan. We'll start at the very beginning. Then we'll trace the cycle of major wars and escalations. From there, we'll look at who the key players are today and the core problems that keep blocking peace. And finally, we'll explore what the future might actually hold, according to the data. So let's rewind. To really get what's happening now, you have to go back to the turn of the 20th century. This is when the seeds of this conflict were first planted, right in the soil of the old declining Ottoman Empire. This timeline really shows those critical first steps. Before World War I, the land was known as Palestine, part of the Ottoman Empire, mostly populated by Arabs. But at the same time in Europe, the Zionist movement was gaining steam, with the goal of establishing a Jewish homeland right there. So after the Ottomans collapsed, Britain took control and issued the Balfour Declaration, and this was a huge moment. It supported a national home for the Jewish people, but also promised to protect the rights of the people already living there. You can see the tension baked in from the start. As Jewish immigration shot up under British rule, so did the clashes with local Arabs. It all came to a head in 1947 when the UN stepped in with a plan to split the land into two states, one Jewish, one Arab. Jewish leaders said yes, Arab nations said no, and that set the stage for the First War. The day after Israel declared its independence in 1948, its Arab neighbors invaded. And when that war was over, the human cost was just staggering. This number, 750,000, represents the Palestinians who either fled or were forced from their homes. This created a refugee crisis that, to this day, remains a central, unhealed wound right at the heart of the conflict. And that first war in 1948, well, it wasn't the end. It was the start of a really devastating pattern. The next few decades were defined by a series of major wars that didn't just change the map, they changed the mindset of the entire region. The next really critical moment was the Six-Day War in 1967. Israel, feeling like an attack from its neighbors was about to happen, launched this massive preemptive strike. And the result? It was stunning, and it would change the physical and political reality of the conflict forever. Now, what's so wild about this is just how much changed and how fast. In less than a week, Israel captured the Gaza Strip and the Sinai from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. This is the moment the military occupation of Palestinian territories begins, a reality that has fueled resistance movements and defined the conflict ever since. 6 years later, the tables completely turned. In 1973, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in Judaism, Egypt and Syria launched a coordinated surprise attack. They were trying to win back the land they'd lost. This caught Israel totally off guard and really shattered its sense of being invincible. Now, even though Israel fought back and won militarily, the psychological shock was huge. It actually forced a major shift. The vulnerability Israel felt, combined with a restored sense of pride in Egypt, opened the door for the first serious U.S.-led diplomacy, and that led to the historic Camp David Accords, a real peace treaty between Israel and Egypt that proved, hey, maybe a negotiated peace was actually possible. But peace with the Palestinians? That turned out to be so much more complicated. In 1987, the First Intifada erupted. This was a widespread grassroots uprising against the occupation. All that pressure eventually led to the 1993 Oslo Accords, which felt like a huge moment of hope. But that hope just fell apart. You had continued Israeli settlement building, the Israeli prime minister was assassinated by an extremist, and a wave of Palestinian suicide bombings just destroyed any trust that was being built. All of that led to the Second Intifada in 2000, which was a much, much deadlier cycle of violence. And that brings us to the modern era. In 2007, the militant group Hamas took full control of the Gaza Strip. This created a deep political split among Palestinians and kicked off a new, relentless cycle of conflict with Israel, marked by devastating wars in 2014, 2021, and 2023. So, we've walked through the history. Now, let's zoom in on the present. Who are the key players on the board today? And what are these stubborn, seemingly impossible problems that cause every single peace effort to just fail? This table gives us a pretty clear breakdown. You've got Israel, whose primary goal is security and regional recognition, with its most powerful ally being the United States. For the Palestinians, it's all about statehood, ending the occupation, and finding a solution for refugees, and they have broad support from Arab nations and the UN. Then you have the U.S. trying to balance its strong support for Israel with its official goal of a two-state solution, and the rest of the region is completely divided. You have countries like Iran that are fiercely opposed to Israel, and then you have others, like the UAE, who've started normalizing relations. So here's the billion-dollar question. Why can't these players agree? This slide lays out the core issues that have blown up every single negotiation. And these aren't abstract ideas. They're the direct legacy of the history we just covered. Where do you draw the borders, especially with all the Israeli settlements in the West Bank? What do you do with Jerusalem, a city holy to both sides? How do you even negotiate when Palestinian leadership is split between Fatah and Hamas? At its very heart, it's a clash of two fundamental stories. Israel's deep-seated fears for its security versus the Palestinian daily experience of military occupation. Okay, so with all these seemingly impossible hurdles, what does the future actually look like? Let's break down the main scenarios on the table, and according to our source, how likely they really are. For decades, the world is really focused on two main paths. You've got the two-state solution, which would create an independent Palestine right alongside Israel. But as we've seen, all the arguments over land, security, and settlements make this feel more like a distant dream than ever. The other idea is a one-state solution, where everyone lives together in a single country. But honestly, with such deep distrust, most experts think this would be incredibly unstable. And this chart from our source? Wow. It paints a pretty sobering picture of what's probable. The most likely scenario, at 60%, is just more of the same. A continuation of the current conflict. The absolute worst-case scenario is a full-blown regional war. And meanwhile, those classic peace ideas, the two-state and one-state solutions, are now seen as the least likely outcomes of all. And this quote really just hits the nail on the head. This isn't some simple dispute you can fix with a new treaty. It's a clash of national identities, of historical trauma, and of geopolitical interests that has become deeply, profoundly locked in place for more than a century. Which leaves all of us with this final, really challenging question. After all the wars, all the uprisings, and all the failed peace talks, is a diplomatic breakthrough even possible anymore? Or is this a conflict that's just fated to continue, a cycle of violence passed down from one generation to the next? It's a question the entire world is still waiting to see answered.